Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Wow. Off to a good start. We got a camera that doesn't want to work. I'm pressing all the wrong buttons. We're off to a really good start. Okay. Welcome once again to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. I am, as always, your host, Duck. And today is crazy Butterfingers Day, I guess. Nothing seems to be going right. So hopefully from here forward, it'll go okay. All right. So that's what I did. Okay. All right. Today is Lightroom edition. We're going to be, I got a nice little surprise for you for working with Lightroom, something that I don't think we've done yet. I may have touched upon it like years ago. So I think we're going to revisit it, and that's how to take an image and give it that kind of like day to night look. So anyway, that's what we're going to be doing today, and all in Lightroom. Before we start, I just got a couple things that I want to mention that are coming up. The first one is a presentation by, through the CTPPA, which I am a member of. One of the CTPPA members who is legally blind is going to be giving a presentation called Blind Ambition, How I Make Photography Visually Impaired Friendly. And the way she described it is that you don't necessarily need to be visually impaired to take away some really good concepts when it comes to some of the things she's going to be sharing. There are many situations where, we are in a low light situation and we just need to have certain practices in place that allows us to really easily work with our equipment in a way that doesn't interrupt the workflow. So she's going to be going a lot of organizational stuff, lots of tips and tricks, for, working in situations where you really can't rely on your eyes. So anyway, if you are interested in that, it's coming up October 18th. Which is, I believe, a Wednesday. I believe it's a Wednesday. I can't recall. And it's going to be held it's being hosted by a company called Photo Flash Drive. They're headquartered out of Guilford, so it's going to be at their facility. Photo Flash Drive is a company that well, the Photo Flash Drive part, what they do is they offer custom imprinted flash drives for photographers to be able to load it with images, with a gallery, with a photo album, and present it to your clients. They're very popular among wedding photographers, portrait photographers, so you can bundle, a bunch of digital images onto a flash drive, and it's packaged nicely in this, nice little box, and it's all branded with your company, and it just ups the value. So they're going to be hosting the event at their facility, and when you register, it's going to ask you to upload a logo. If you have a photography business, or if you want, you just, upload something with your name on it. And they're going to be giving all the attendees a free gift. I don't know what the free gift is. Along with the Photo Flash drives, they also do laser engraving and etching on all kinds of stuff. Everything from water bottles to, I don't know, you name it. Anyway, so if you're interested in this little workshop, it's like I said, it's on the 18th from 7 to 9. You do have to register through the CTPPA, and it is $20 to attend for non-CTPPA members. Okay. All right. Also coming up, I don't have a date or a location yet, but I want to get a group together to go out and photograph the fall foliage. The trees are just starting to turn, and I have a funny feeling that we're going to have a good season this year, simply because of all the rain we've been having. So hopefully it doesn't last too short of a time. So we'll play it by ear. But anyway, on my Facebook page, I sent out a little request. If you know of a location that would be ideal to kind of photograph a scenic view, so think landscapes, think beautiful landscape, something that's going to capture the colors of fall. So if you have a favorite spot, go ahead and throw it into the Facebook thread there, and I'll pick something. Okay. All right. Anybody got any news? Oh, Bill's not here. So, anybody got anything they want to share? No? Okay.
Beautiful day today.
Yeah, it's supposed to be warm for the rest of the week, from what I understand. Yeah, yeah.
I was trying to get out today, but I had bookwork. First of the month, got a lot of bookwork. So.
Yep. I hear you. I hear you. Okay, so let's get into tonight's lesson. All right, so actually, before we start that, I want to pass something by you guys. Do you guys ever do anything like photo challenges? Either through a club or through a photography group, where they toss out a challenge and you have to kind of complete the challenge. Do you guys do anything like that?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, awesome. One of the things that I was interested in putting together is something that might turn into, I don't know, might turn into a paid workshop down the line. And that's where I offer up these photographic challenges that are designed to help build a portfolio. Obviously, I'm kind of gearing this towards people who want to either go pro or semi-pro, or have a strong portfolio that they can show to their client to say, hey, this is my work. But also targeting certain skill sets that are required to get to that higher level. So I've been kind of working on a bunch of different tasks, I guess you can call them, or challenges, where I don't know, I have a whole bunch of them, and they kind of build up in skill as you go along. So it's not only a skill builder, but it's it's not only a portfolio builder, but it's also a skill builder. And it's going to be paired with some actual video lessons that I want to record. So if you guys are interested in helping me out, and I'll put these out and let you guys test drive it and give me feedback and see where it goes. So It's still very much in the development mode right now. So the other thing I'm working on is a presentation that I'm going to be giving to the North Haven Camera Club. So those of you who are members of the North Haven Camera Club, I'll be seeing you in December. So looking forward to that. All right. So what I want to talk about is low light, editing low light photos, and specifically even taking a regular photograph and turning it into a low light photography kind of shot. So it's typically referred to as day to night editing, where you take a image that is let me put this in. So this was the shot that I took. It was during the day, and with some magic within Lightroom, I turned it into a evening, kind of like dusk photograph. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of the editing techniques that are used to create this particular illusion can also be used to create to enhance a low light photograph. So this one here was taken right around sunset, and as you can see, it was very overcast, so it really has no punch. So you take an image like this and you look at it and you go, oh, that's kind of blah. Simply because whenever you photograph anything in lower light, the colors become less saturated, a little bit more muted, simply because there's no light that is really strongly reflecting off of the colors, right? So everything gets muted, everything, the contrast kind of tends to drop. So if we can, bring back some of that pop, it just makes it look like what you experienced there. All right, because we all know when we're on site experiencing, the beauty of a sunset, our eyes sees the color in the sky a little bit differently than the camera does. The camera, in order to capture a big enough dynamic range from a low light situation, often washes out a lot of those colors. So, it's our job to kind of put those colors back in where they were, So, so some of the skills that are used with this photograph can be applied when editing for an actual low light situation. Okay, sounds like fun. All right, so we're going to start off analyzing this particular image here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead, I want to create a virtual copy, and I'm going to reset that virtual copy back to how it was shot. And I'm just going to go through the editing process because from what I understand, you guys kind of get a lot from watching these, full edits. Okay, so the program that I am developing for December's workshop is how to take a rather blah image and just, you know, give it some life. Make it something that you're proud of, and, you know, something that you can brag about. All right, so as you guys know, whenever I approach any kind of photo editing, the first thing that I analyze is, okay, what is wrong with this particular image? And you guys can probably tell that there's a lot wrong with this image. Okay, where do I have my drawing? Okay, good. Okay, so obviously one of the biggest issues is that the brightest area is up here, all right? And in contrast, we have our darkest area down below. So we have this rather high contrast between the sky and the ground. So what ends up happening is that our eye is overpowered by all this brightness up in the sky. And you can see I kind of put my horizon right smack in the center. I don't know why, you know, because as you can tell, the sky wasn't very interesting. It was very overcast on this particular day. And while I can see the colors with my bare eyes, they weren't very, very strong to begin with. All right. But I did know that I can pull some of those colors out. Even if I have to artificially put the colors in, I don't mind that, because the colors were there to begin with. I'm just kind of pulling them out, enhancing them. But what we need to do is we need to find some kind of balance where we darken the sky, all right, and we brighten the foreground. Now, obviously, if I had said, okay, I want to get more detail, more brightness out of my foreground elements, I would have had to, you know, open up my camera a lot more and let more light in. And what that would have done is it would have burned out my sky and made it white with no detail. All right. So then I can say, okay, well, if I lose my sky, I would need to get a second photograph for the sky, you know, and then underexpose the sky. And, you know, then what would happen is that my foreground would turn to black with no detail, which is a technique. You can use, you know, exposure blending to pull the sky, a useful sky from one image and a useful foreground from the other image. But I felt that I was within my range by kind of splitting the difference with my exposure settings. All right. And how can I tell? The reason I can tell is because when I was out on the field, I was looking at my histogram when I shot these images. And if we look at the histogram, you're going to notice that in the dark, in the area where it's supposed to be blacks, and the areas that's supposed to be, oh, you know what? I should probably share my screen so you guys can see this a little bit better. Share. There we go. Now you guys can see it. Okay. All right. This hump represents the ground plane, everything from that middle down, that's all dark. You can see that it's this big old lump of dark pixels. But if you notice, they're not pushed over all the way to the left-hand side, so that there's no black with no detail. As a matter of fact, if we were to put on our clipping highlights, and that's this little triangle here, you'll notice that only in the deepest shadow areas are we getting any clipping. All right, so everything that you see blue, that is where the pixels have gone to black with no detail. Okay, now because this is a raw image, I also know that there's enough data there that I can pull that back if need be. But overall, it's just pretty much reserved to that little slice of area completely underneath the boat here. So it doesn't make any sense to even worry about that. Even if that were to get deeper and go into black all the way across, it won't matter because it makes sense for this particular image. If I turn on my highlight warning, all right, which is all the way on the right-hand side, my highlight warning would be indicated by red, all right? And as you can see, nothing in the image has turned to red. So I am well within my exposure range between black and white. All right, so, a lot of people would say, because we have such a high contrast between the sky and the ground, this is a great candidate for HDR photography. And like I said, yes, that is an option. But if we look at just by the numbers, just the numbers alone, okay, I can tell I am well within my exposure range. All right, within the dynamic range of between black and solid black and solid white. Okay, so because of that, I knew that I had plenty of flexibility to really manipulate this image to get it to the way I want. Excuse me. All right. Now, oh boy. My voice is going already. My camera went. My fingers are going. Now my voice is going. All right. Whenever you're manipulating light and shadow in post-processing, you have to be careful with how far you push something. If you want to push something far, it's better to drop the exposure than to raise the exposure. By dropping the exposure, you're minimizing any kind of grain that may be in the image or noise. When you push it up, if there's any noise in the image, it's going to amplify it. So it's always better to pull down than to push up. So in this particular case, if we again look at the histogram, you can see that I don't have to go too far to pull down on the shadow side. And with my highlight side, I could probably have shifted this a little bit more to the right and I would have been okay. But, in this particular case, it really doesn't matter. because what I want to do is right now we have a valley created by our histogram. Okay, so we have this really big hump all the way in the shadow side, and we have a big hump in our highlight side. And that literally is this part here is the top part of our image, and this part here is the bottom of our image. Okay, make sense? All right, so what I want to do is I want to take the shadow side and bring some of that very selectively up into the midtones, and I want to bring the sky down into the midtones. So I want to brighten certain parts of the foreground and darken a lot of the sky. Okay, so this is going to be darkened, and parts of this are going to be lightened. All right, so selective dodging. Okay, selective dodging. All right, we're definitely going to burn the sky. All right, and we're also going to color it. All right, so again, there are three things that you need to consider with all your images when it comes to manipulating them. You're going to be manipulating light and shadow. You're going to be manipulating color, or you're going to be manipulating texture. Okay, all right. As I edit this, what I want to do is I want to bring our subject more into the forefront. Okay, and of course the boat is our subject, and if you look at it right now, the boat and the sand and the little embankment behind it, and even the houses in the far background, they are all the same tone. So nothing really stands out. We have to really, really look for what it is that is capturing our eye. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I bring this boat out from its background. Okay, so as I darken the background, it's going to get closer to the tonality of our foreground. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to shift the exposure, all right, so that visually we're not looking at the sky, but we're looking more at the boat. All right, so we got to bring this down and we got to bring this up. Okay, all right, so that's the goal. First thing I want to do is I want to normalize my image. All right, that means checking your horizon. The horizon looks fairly decent. I don't have a water line to go by, but you know, and any uprights from the house, they look okay. So I don't think I need to do anything about squaring it. Composition wise, framing, I'm very happy with this, so I'm not going to reframe it. I'm not going to do any kind of cropping or anything. And as far as colors go, I might want to cool it off a little bit more. So I'm going to bring the color temperature down into the blues a little bit. And if you notice, just that tiny little bit, the sky has gotten a lot bluer. Okay. Now, if we analyze the sky, we have we have blue up here, and then we have this orange red here. Okay. And it's literally striped. So what I want to do is I want to create a gradient that kind of pulls the eye down from that upper edge. So I want to get away from this upper edge and I want to bring the eye down lower. Okay. So I'm going to burn the upper part. Okay. And I want the eye to kind of go to this orange band. All right. I want to put a little bit more emphasis on the sunset. So we got to pull colors out. Okay. So by cooling the whole entire scene a little bit, we can see that we've put a little bit of contrast against that reddish orangey yellow band. All right. But we're starting to lose it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, while I'm here, I'm going to go into my calibration. And I want to see if any of these will enhance any of the colors. All right. And what I normally do is I'll go on the saturation part. All right. We have hue and saturation. I usually go straight to the saturation slider of each of these primaries, the red, the green, and the blue primary. And if you just wiggle it back and forth, all right, you can see, okay, so here's my red. Look what it does to that band of yellow, that orangey color. All right, so right off the bat, I'm gonna bring that up because I want to bring that color out. All right, green. All right, green brings it more into the yellow range than the orange range. So I'm happy with that. Maybe I'll bring up the green saturation, and the blue saturation kind of really emphasizes the blue in the shadow. I don't want to go too heavy-handed with that, so I might want to just leave that alone for now. All right. The other reason is because I also know that I want to bring out some detail in the boat. And the top part of the boat is red. So I don't know if I want to go too heavy-handed with cooling off that red, because if I want to bring back some of that red, I don't want to work too hard to counter what I just did with the blue. All right, hopefully that made sense. Okay. So I'm going to leave the blue saturation alone. Okay. And that's pretty much it for the lens correction. I'm going to go ahead and activate the lens profile for this camera. I just checked those. Normally this is done for me automatically as I bring my images in, but because I reset this, it kind of reset that as well. All right. So everything from here on is going to be local adjustments. All right. So let's tackle the sky first. And the nice thing is we have right here, as part of our new masking tools, we have the sky selection. All right, and give it a few seconds, and Lightroom will analyze the image, determine what the sky is, and as you can see, it does a really, really good job of selecting what it sees as sky. Okay. And if we just take the exposure and bring it down, you're going to notice that it's going to darken everything. But if you recall what I said earlier, what I want to do is I want to darken from the top down. Okay. I want to darken from the top down. All right. So what I can do here, let me reset that, is I can intersect this with a gradient. Okay. Or actually, I could have probably done it just with a gradient. All right. let's see. No, I'll show you how to intersect. All right. If you press the Alt or Option key, you'll notice that by default you have two buttons. You have the Add button and the Subtract button. So this allows you to add to the mask or subtract from the mask. Okay. But if we press and hold the Alt, it turns to this intersect button, intersect. Okay. Now it doesn't matter because you can always go to the little ellipsis here, click on that, and you also have the option to intersect mask with. All right. And in this case, we would say intersect with the select sky or linear gradient. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to intersect with a linear gradient. All right, so I have a sky selection. I want to intersect it with a linear gradient. So I'm going to go ahead and pull from the top down. And as you can see, as I pull down, it's going to keep this within the constraints of that sky selection that I made. All right, and what I'm doing is I'm just applying a gradient just to that selection. As you can see, it's being kept to that. All right, so I'm going to hold my Shift key and I'm going to keep it restrained to the horizontal position. Okay, so now I have a gradient coming, heavy at the top, lighter at the bottom, and now I can go ahead and manipulate my sky. Okay. All right. You can see if I increase my exposure, it's going to turn into white, and I have my highlight indicators. All right. I'm just going to turn those off. The letter J, if you ever want to, the letter J toggles that on and off really, really easily. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and darken the sky. And here I have to make a decision is, how do I want to darken this? All right. Typically, when you start darkening things, when you burn things, you start losing saturation. So I don't want to lose too much saturation simply because this is a sky. It's supposed to be backlit, so I have to be careful. I still want it to kind of look like a sky. All right, so we can bring the exposure down. And what that does is it grabs all the midtones and starts pulling them down. Or I can see, all right, if I just, since my sky, all right, remember my sky is right here all the way to the right-hand side in my highlights section, okay? If I grab my highlights and pull it down, okay? Let's see if that will do what we need it to, okay? All right, and as you can see, it's really not doing very much, okay? So that's not going to work, all right? And likewise, pulling down on the lights isn't going to work either. It's just going to give us that flat look, okay? Previously, I talked about pushing and pulling, all right? So the highlight slider and the white slider both push, okay? If I go to my shadows or my blacks, what we're doing is we're pulling that exposure down. All right, so there's my blacks. They're really not affecting very much. All right, my shadows really didn't do anything. So nothing is working except for our exposure. So that's what we're going to go with. All right. How deep do I want the sky? Well, in this particular case, I want to go pretty heavy-handed. All right, I want to give it that nighttime look, but I also want to contrast or not contrast. I want to balance the foreground. All right, and our foreground is very, very dark. So the upper part, in order to bring the eye in, I want to make that very, very dark as well. Okay. All right. And as you can see, it turned this kind of grayish blue. All right. So while I'm here, I want to see if I could add a little bit blue into it. And I might even, there we go, bring my shadows down and bring my black. So we're really, really pushing this. Okay. All right. I'm not too crazy about that teal color, you know, but we'll see if we can kind of fix that. All right. And we can do that with the tint. Okay. Because our tint, if we look at our tint goes from green on the left-hand side to red on the right-hand side. All right. So our temperature is from blue to yellow. Our tint is from green to red. Okay. So once we understand that and we see this teal color, all right, what is teal? Teal is blue with an influence of green. So if we take the tint slider away from the green and bring it into the red, we start removing that teal color, okay? Which makes sense because that strip of yellow, all right, has a heavy yellow, orange, and red influence. So we're bringing everything into that realm. Okay, and as you can see, I can really push these sliders in this particular image quite far. The reason I can push them that far is because overall, the initial image was rather monochromatic. It was pretty gray. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm artificially manipulating the colors here. Okay, all right, the colors were barely there. All right, let's see if I can pull that blue back a little bit more. Okay, that looks better. Okay, and maybe even, let's see, play around with saturation. All right, that looks good. Okay, so this is before and this is after. Before, after. So you can see what I've done is I've burnt the ceiling and it's forcing the eye downward into the image. Okay. It's taken our eye from up here and bringing it down. All right. Right now it lands here simply because there's nothing else for it to land on. All right. And we're gonna fix that shortly. Okay. All right, so this is our sky. Okay. We're going to create another mask. And what I want to do is I want to bring out a little bit more of this yellow color. All right, so I'm going to go here. And one of my favorite masks is the radial gradient. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a really, really narrow but really large band with this radial filter. Okay. And I'm going to, excuse me, raise the color temperature up a little bit, bring it more into the yellows. And let's see if I add red to it. Ooh, kind of makes that sky a little bit more purple along there. I kind of like that. Okay. All right. And exposure wise, let's see if we, yeah, I don't think we really need anything for that. I think we're good there. Okay. All right. So that just takes it and kind of like shifts the color from that kind of like almost neon yellow to a more sunset orangey yellow. There we go. Okay. All right. Now, if I wanted to create, some semblance of a sun, I don't think it's going to work in this particular case, but we can always create another radial gradient. Again, make, something fairly large, but take the inner circle and make it really, really small. And then just up the exposure. And let's see. Yeah, it's not really adding much to this. Let's see. Bring the shadows up, yeah. It's not really doing anything to it. So I'm not going to even bother. Okay. All right. I'm kind of happy with the way the sky is looking right now. It definitely gives it more of that sunset feel. All right. And we've definitely increased the contrast between the top part and the bottom part of the sky. And because we burned it, we're bringing our eye in. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to work on the bottom part. Okay. If we squint, right now, the brightest part of our image is this band of gold right in the center. All right. That's not the important part of the image. My subject is this boat right here. So I want the eye to, in effect, go past that band and land on my boat. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, once again, create a radial gradient. All right. And what I want to do is I want to make it about the size of the boat. And I'm going to go ahead and place it right over the boat. Okay. And we're going to just bring up the highlights and bring up the exposure. I want to increase the saturation simply because we've lost a lot of the saturation being a low light environment. All right. And here's where we have to also start making a decision about where do we want to go in terms of how we represent the colors of this particular area. Okay. Again, we can go cool or we can go warm. The boat is receiving, we want to make it look like it's receiving light from that fading sunset. Okay. So we know that as the sun goes down, that sun's going to get yellower and yellower and going into oranges and reds and violets and all kinds of crazy colors. All right. So we might think to ourselves, well, I want to apply some warm tones to the boat simply because it's picking up some of those colors. Okay. And you may say, which sounds logical, but if we think about it, okay, the boat is actually not receiving a lot of direct light from the sun. If anything, all these little highlights you see, they're not coming from the sun. They're actually a reflection of the very bright sky that we just toned down. We're seeing a mirror reflection of the sky. So it's not really receiving direct sun. Okay. So because of that, the boat is actually in shadow. So it makes sense that the boat would have a cool cast to it, okay? But remember, we already added a coolness right from the get-go. So if I add any more coolness, it's just going to start turning the boat blue, and we don't want that. Okay? So if I do anything, it is for the benefit of just the red part of that boat. So I am going to warm it up just a little bit, because remember I said earlier, if you add too much blue to a red color, it starts making it look less like red and more like maroon. All right, I don't want to do that. I want to bring out some of the vibrancy of the red. Okay, so for that case, I'm going to add a little touch of warmth, just enough to counterbalance the blue that I added earlier. Okay, but not enough so it looks like it's being influenced by the sunset. I hope that makes sense for you guys, because it's a fine little balance here. Okay, all right. And then the rest is just, how do we get this to look naturally brightened? Okay, so one of the things that I don't want to do is I don't want to brighten any of my dark, the dark pixels, the blacks and the shadows. I don't want to go too crazy, because then it gets this weird, funky, halo, washed out halo look. Okay, if anything, all right, I might darken the blacks more. All right, why? If we think about how we determine what is light and what is dark, is by comparing it against its contrast. All right, so if somebody says that's light, how do you know that's light? Because I can see it is brighter than the dark part around it. Likewise, if somebody says that's dark, how do you know it's dark? You compare it against the light things that are surrounding it. Okay? If the contrast of something that's dark and something that's light is very minimal, it looks washed out. It looks tonally neutral, it looks blah. Okay? So by increasing the contrast, we are increasing the separation between dark and light. All right. So if I want to make something look lighter, and I don't want to lighten it too much, I will just darken the shadow parts. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so here I'm pushing up the whites. So in this particular case, I'm really pushing the whites. Okay. And if you notice the histogram here, all right, remember earlier when we first started, we had two humps with a valley in the center. Look at that hump that was all the way to the right-hand side. That hump is gone. Okay. We now have a spike right in the center. All right. And what's the center? That's our 50% gray. That's our midtone value. All right. That right there is a lot of these lighter values. All right. We have this little bit here that's trailing here. Okay. And if you notice, let me zoom in. If you notice, it's orange in color. Okay. That means we have a lot of warm tones in that little bit of spikes that is all the way in our highlight section. Okay. That's our yellow band in the center there. Okay. So we've taken the majority of that down. All right. So what used to be the eye catcher, it's now gone. It's pushed more into the dark tones. And now what I want to do is I want to bring some of those dark tones and push them into the light. Okay. All right. So I'm going to continue the highlight. Oops. I'm in still drawing. My highlights really doesn't do too much. Okay. But my whites, all right, is really doing a lot on the side of that boat. Okay. And my exposure, I bring up my exposure. Okay. Now I can push that exposure up a lot. I'm actually about almost 2 stops brighter. All right. But the reason it doesn't look overly bright is because I countered it by dropping the black. Remember, we brought our blacks down to neutralize that. Okay. So before, after. Okay. And if we look, we're getting a little bit of bleed right above here. All right. Encroaching into our sky. All right. Which I don't want. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to subtract that from our mask. And I'm just going to use a brush. Okay. And I am going to just erase from that upper area. Okay. And then if we notice, this little part of the boat is sticking up. All right. And it is outside of our, the influence of that circular gradient. So what I want to do is, in this case, I want to add to our selection, and I'm going to use a brush, and I'm going to go ahead and just add to that. Okay. All right. Now we also have the outrigger here and the little pontoon. Okay. So I have to make a decision. Do I want to bring any attention to that? All right. So let's talk this out. Okay. Actually, let me go ahead and I'll create another radial mask just in this area here. And I'm just going to brighten this up just to show you what I mean here. Okay. So let's say I want to brighten that part up because obviously we brightened up the boat. This is part of the boat. Okay. But now, if we think about how we read an image, okay, we read left to right, top to bottom, correct? Okay. We've already forced the eye down into this band, okay? And because we brightened the boat, all right, if you squint, the boat is now ever so slightly brighter than that horizon line, okay? Not by much, but enough to really, pull the eye down. All right, so the eye comes down, goes through that band of yellow, which is what I wanted to do, and it hits the boat, right? The boat has the outriggers. So as we explore the image, the eye is going to go along that outrigger because why? It's a leading line. It's a leading line. Okay. And then if we give it something bright to hold on to, all right, it's going to go to that bright area, which is right next to our border. All right. So our eye is just going to continue across that bridge that we created to that bright spot and out of the frame, which is not what we want. We want the viewer's eye to come down, hit the boat, explore, and then stay there. Okay? So I'm not going to brighten that up simply because it works against me. Okay? All right, so let's see. Let's name this sky color. And this one is our boat. Okay. All right. Now, we've effectively captured the our vision here. Okay. But if we look at this negative space around it, which is very monotone, dark gray, there's really nothing there of value. All right. However, okay. All right. So there's nothing there of value. The eye is going to want to explore anyway. All right. It sees the boat. What's the boat sitting on? The boat's sitting on sand. It's pretty bland. Okay. I've explored the sand. There's nothing of interest. What do I do now? We want the eye to return back up. All right. So because this whole area is very flat, all right, all one shade, all right, including that pontoon, all right, I want something that's going to force the eye to come back up. So how do we do that? We burn the ground down a little bit more, all right, and I actually have a preset for that. It's called Burn Ground, and I think we did this three months ago, something like that. All right, so if you follow it along, you should have a preset like that. All I got to do is add it, and there it is. And if we want to manipulate it, because you can see it went a little bit too high. It's going up into the boat. I don't want that. I just want that, and I might even want to angle it just a little bit, because if we look at the ground, there's a much larger area of blankness on the right than it is on the left. Okay, so by angling it, we're kind of giving it a little bit of visual balance. Okay, and -1 stop, that looks about right. Okay, I'm going to do one more radial gradient. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to target pretty much just the area where the boat is. Okay, and I want to, in this particular case, I want to target the texture. So I want to see if I can increase the texture, give it a little bit of clarity, gives it a little bit of punch. Okay, and voila, that looks pretty good. All right, so before, after. All right, what that does, it just it's micro contrast, all right, within the texture part of the image. Okay, all right, and we'll call this texture. And that pretty much, I think that let me go sky color. I'm going to drop that exposure down just a little bit. That's, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Now we're really coming into the boat. There we go. Okay, so before, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see. Okay, hold on, hold on, hold on. Reset. Okay, so that's our before and that's our after. Okay. Before, after. Before, after. Any questions on any of the techniques we used? Okay. All right. So what I want you to take away from this right now is how we manipulated the colors to give us a false sense of a different time period. Okay. In a sense. Okay. So we actually made it look like it was later in the evening than it actually was. Okay. And we're also manipulating it to kind of create a little bit of harmony between the upper part and the lower part. Okay. All right. The next image, which is our day to night image. All right. Let me go ahead and make a virtual copy. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and reset this. Okay. This one, this one was taken a little bit later in the evening. If I don't know if you can tell, but if we look at the some of the shadows, they're a little bit on the longer side. Maybe not. Hold on. When was this taken? Oh no, this was midday. Midday, 11:30. It was overcast. That's what it was. This picture's old. This from 2018. So my memory is a little hazy on that one. Overcast sky. And I was there to photograph something else, and I had some time to kill. So I figured, you know what? Let me take some pictures of the green. All right. So what I want to do is I want to get this from a boring day shot to more of a evening shot. Okay. Now, granted, this is still a relatively boring image. It would have been nice if, you know, there was a person there, you know, so maybe somebody walking their dog, would have made it a little bit more interesting. But what appealed to me when I originally took the shot were the rows of lanterns that were along the walkway. So obviously, if you have lanterns, they should be lit. And if they're going to be lit, they're going to be lit at night. Okay, so that's what I want to do. I want to light the lanterns, and I want to make it an evening shot. So first things first, we're going to normalize the image. Our can't see our horizon, so horizon's not going to be what's in question, but all our uprights for the gazebo and the lanterns look pretty much straight up and down. So we're good there. We have one that's a little bit of a leaner, but hey, that's okay. All right. So the next thing is, you know, gotta activate my lens correction. Gonna go ahead and give it that. You know, it just gets rid of that kind of like barrel distortion and all the good stuff. All right. I'm gonna skip the basic. I'm gonna jump right to calibration and let me see what these sliders do. All right. Now, just like the previous image, if you notice, when you start losing light, you start losing the vibrancy of colors. Colors start looking duller, more muted. All right. So if this is going to be an evening, photograph of this green, the grass is not going to be this luscious green, bright green color, right? It's going to be a lot more muted. It's going to be a lot cooler. All right. So if you notice the blue primary saturation, if I increase it, we're actually adding vibrancy, color vibrancy to the colors that are already there. And you can see how vibrant that green is. But as soon as we take it the other way, we're removing a lot of yellow, all right, and we're going a little bit more into the blue tones, right? And you can see how that grass has lost that vibrancy, looks a lot duller, all right, a lot more muted. Okay, we can do the same thing with the green. Obviously, if we add green, it's just going to make it very, very bright, vibrant. But if we take away, all right, we're taking the saturation out of the green. It's just going to make it look like dead grass. That's not what we want. Okay, and then the red. Actually, you know what? I'm going to push the red a little bit simply because I kind of like what it's doing to the trees. It's putting a little bit of life into the trees, into the tree bark, all right, and into the gazebo. All right. I kind of like that. All right. So that looks pretty good. Now we can start tackling our exposure. Okay. Now, the one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to take our exposure slider and just drop it down and say, oh, this is what it looks like when the sun goes down. All right. Because if you notice, everything from our midtones to our shadow side has gone significantly darker. But what stands out? All the bright areas that were originally in our image, the sky, the picket fence, that white church all the way in the background, all right? Because they are more over to the white and highlight side. By pulling the exposure down, it doesn't pull it enough down where we need it to go in order to look like buildings and fences that are not being lit. They still look like they're being lit. Okay. So this, just by moving the exposure, is not going to do it. So I want to tackle those bright spots first. So if I go to my whites, okay, here's a word of caution. All right, which I don't know if I've touched on this in the past. On our histogram, we have black all the way on the left, white all the way on the right. Okay? As soon as you start pulling away from the white, what do we get? We get shades of gray. If something is supposed to be white and we start pulling it away, all right, everything that is white pixels starts becoming gray. And if we're taking those white pixels and pushing them into the gray, and we're not moving the grays along at the same rate, it starts looking crunched and compressed, and that ugly, muted, matted, gray blob with no texture. All right. We don't want the building and the picket fence to go gray with no texture. We want to keep the texture. We just want to shift the overall exposure of the white building, the white picket fence, from the whites into the grays. All right, and in one chunk. So we have to be careful how we do it. All right. As we work with these areas of white, we're also going to target the lighter parts of our image. All right, so these lighter areas of our path, our grass, all right, all this up here, they're also going to start dropping, all right, which is what we want. Okay. But if I just crunch the whites, all right, you'll notice, let me zoom in here. Doesn't look too bad, right? But now we're starting to get that kind of like dull gray, all right? Not necessarily an unlit surface look. It looks more like it's been artificially brought down, okay? So, and then here we're going even worse, okay? So we have to be very careful, all right? So I brought the whites down, I brought the highlights down as far as I could, all right? And I have to make sure that we continue that with our exposure, okay? But I don't want to compress everything flat. I want to create a little bit of contrast, because although we lose contrast as the light gets dim, all right, for a photograph, that doesn't look very pleasing. All right, in order to read properly, we need to bring back the contrast into the image. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up my shadows and my blacks a little bit and increase the contrast. And one trick that sometimes helps is actually the dehaze slider, okay? All right, and you can see not adding haze, we want to take away the haze. All right, and you can see what that does is it brings back a little bit of that texture into our image, okay? So before, after, okay? And I just went about 50, 60 points on a dehaze, all right? If we want, we can also touch up the clarity and the texture here, because that's gonna give us that micro contrast within the texture, okay? So now it's definitely looking like something that would have been taken later in the evening rather than at 11:30 in the day, all right? So before, after, okay? All right, so there's still a little bit of that ambient light. The sun hasn't dropped beyond the horizon yet. We're still getting some of that sun, okay? All right, so I'm happy with the way this is looking so far, all right? Now I want to touch a little bit on the color grading, all right? I don't want to do anything globally with the color temperature, because what I want to do is I want to tackle the highlights and the shadows part separately. If I just use the temp slider here, it's going to attack everything globally. All right, everything's going to be done globally. So everything that is bright is also going to get colorized blue, which is not what I want. Okay, I want the illusion that there's still a little bit of sun just peeking over the hillside. All right, so for that, I'm going to go ahead and jump to my color grading. And I'm going to select my shadows. And for my shadows, I'm going to start adding a cool tone. All right, and you can see how I want you to watch the grass. The grass goes from this kind of like vibrant green to a more muted blue green. Okay. All right, so a little bit of blue. But in the highlights, all right, where, you know, the sun would actually be hitting part of that building in the background and maybe even reflecting some of the light onto the picket fence, I want to add warmth to that. So I'm going to go to my highlight side, okay? And if we were to draw a line here, all right, where I went blue before, I'm going to go to the opposite side, okay, and pick something in the orange yellow side for my highlights. Okay. And what that's doing, it's very subtle. It's not overly warming it up, but it is neutralizing any blue that is affecting it from my manipulation of the shadows. Okay. All right. Now, I haven't touched anything in the midtones, and you may or may not need to, depending on the kind of image you're working on. All right. In this particular case, I think it may benefit a little bit from the midtones. All right. So now, what do we do with our midtones? We have to determine, all right, this fake sky, this fake sunset that we're creating, as it drops down, it's going to influence less and less and less of our scene. All right. So as we get less and less, it's going to influence the midtones less and less and less until finally it's just the brightest spots of the image that it is affecting. Okay. So in this case, if I add warmth and we look, I want you to pay attention to this building here. Okay. As I add a little bit of warmth, it's making that building look yellow. And I'm not sure if I like that. Right. However, if we go to the cool side, okay, it's kind of making a little bit more neutral looking. All right. So we have to be very careful with how we do this. All right. Now, if you say, okay, so one way of thinking that I've heard some people do, I'm not sold on this, all right, but some people will do this depending on the image. If they pick one side for their shadows and then the opposite side for their highlights, okay, they will go to one of the two sides for their midtones, depending on how they want it influenced. Okay. So obviously this is the cool and this is the warm. All right. So let's try it out. Okay. So if I go into the reds a little bit, all right, magentas, actually that doesn't look too bad. Okay. But if we go the opposite way into the cyans, oh, that makes that building look green. All right. Which I definitely don't like. All right. So I don't like the yellow. The blue, doesn't quite do it. But if we split the difference and go into this magenta just a touch, actually it doesn't look that bad. Okay. All right. Any questions on what we've done so far? All right. So yeah.
Only question I have is on the bar that says bleeding. When do you use it and what is it used
Oh,
for?
blending. Okay. So the where is it? Color grading. Okay. So let me see if I can. All right. We have all right. So we have our is that visible? That's not very visible, is it? Let me go to black. Here we go. Okay. We have our blacks here. We have our whites here, right? We have our mid-tone or mid gray. Okay. And everything in between. All right. So here we is consider our shadows. All right, our midtones and our highlights. Right? So if we go with nature and we say, okay, usually shadows are cooler, highlights are warmer, right? So we go cool here, warm here. All right. But we have 3 areas we can manipulate. All right. So we have our shadow side, we have our highlight side, and then we have that third one, which is our midtones. Okay. And this one can go either way. It can go cool or warm. Correct? Just like I just explained. Okay. What the blending does is it alters how far these divisions are influencing one side or the other. All right, so it takes this division line, all right, and then just shifts it to the shadow side, to the midtone side, to the midtone side, to the highlight side. Okay, that's all that does. Make sense?
Yes.
All right. And your balance. All right, and so the blending, is how far or how little, and then the balance is that shift left and right. Okay. All right. Moving along. All right. So I'm kind of I kind of like the way everything looks. All right. It looks like it's an evening shot. It looks like the sun is just starting to go over the horizon. Not quite. If I wanted to, I can probably add a little bit more yellow into my highlights. Oops. Okay. And then the luminosity, yeah, really doesn't do much. It's how bright or how dark that influence is. All right. So here's the blend. All right. There you go. It's blending more into it, less into it. Okay. And then the balance, how much of the yellow and how much of the blue. All right. So I'm liking the way it looks. It looks like an evening shot. So now all that's left is to light the lamps. Okay. And there's going to be a couple of considerations. All right. One, we actually need to add light to these lights. Okay. But because they are visible in our scene, they are now, it's what's called a practical light. It's a practical light. Okay. So it's going to have some kind of influence on our scene. All right. And that means that however strong we make these lights, whatever it is lighting has to be represented within the scene. So for example, this lamppost here, if we were to say this is, like a really blazing light, very strong, okay? It's going to light part of this building, correct? Make sense? Okay. So you have to be aware of what your light is influencing. Right. I'm not sure if I'm going to make them that bright. I don't want to, go too crazy influencing all the surrounding stuff. However, there are a couple of considerations. The first one here, we have this garbage pail here directly underneath our foremost light. Okay. So it kind of makes sense that it's probably going to be affected by the light. The second part of that is it will also possibly create a pool of light underneath the lamp that's going to be influenced. So we have to take that into consideration. All right. Okay, so we're going to build it up in stages. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and where's my navigator? Let me zoom out a little bit. I can see pretty much all of these. Okay. All right. We're going to start with this front one. All right. We're going to go with my favorite, which is the radial gradient. I'm going to start right from the very center of the lamp and go outward. And I'm going to give it a sizable circle. All right. But I'm going to make that inner part really, really small. All right. Because we have a point light source. Okay. And you can see that this is our overlay mask. I'm going to turn that down, the transparent, the opacity, just so I can see underneath it. There we go. Okay, that way I can position that right smack in the center. All right. And for this, we're going to go up on our exposure. All right. And you can see as we go up, it looks like it's starting to light the lamp. Okay. And in this particular case, the underlying pixels are already very, very warm. So you got to keep in mind the type of light that this is. So more than likely, these are halogen lights. So they're going to be very warm to begin with. The other thing you got to think about is not just what is the reality of the lights, but what is the mood I want to present in my image. All right. So we've taken everything in this image and we've already pushed it to the cool side. All right. So we want to kind of counterbalance that by adding elements of warmth into it. All right. This is where we're going to start generating some of our interest. All right. By incorporating a contrasting color. All right. So holding the shift key. All right. We can control the size. All right. Now it's influencing the trees around it. Okay. So we have to be careful. I'm going to go ahead and bring my shadows down. All right, because I just want to kind of influence more of the lamp and not necessarily the trees in the background. All right, and that looks pretty good. Okay. All right, what I want to do now is I want to take this and I want to add this same effect to all the other lamps, right? So what I want to do is I want to duplicate this. All right, duplicate radial gradient number 1. All right, and you can see that it made a second version of it. All right, let me put this over here. See how it's kind of like a spotlight? All right, we have our original here, and then we have this duplicate, but they're both within the same mask group. Okay, actually, let's go ahead and call this street lights 1. All right, because we're going to stack these. Okay. All right. I'm going to, holding the shift key, I'm going to size this down scale wise to that second one. All right. I'm going to go ahead and scale that down. And I'm just going to move it right there over the second lamp. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate street light 1. Copy. Oh, nope. I duplicated the wrong one. All right. Duplicate. Where is it? Radial gradient 1. Copy. All right. Move it to the next one. Shift. Hold the shift key. I'm going to size it down. Place it right over that one. I'm going to go to that. Duplicate. I'm going to go ahead and move it to that one. Shift. Hold the shift key. Scale it down to fit. One more time. Duplicate and bring that to the last one. And there we go. Okay. Let's zoom back out. So now we have before and after, before and after. Okay. And it looks like they're lit. All right, not bad. All right, we can probably get away with this, but the only problem is typically within one of these types of lamps, all right, which is, a frosted glass diffuser at the top, okay, you will see the light source itself. All right, so right now what we're seeing is the effect of the light. We're not really seeing the bulb inside the fixture. So that's the next thing we want to add. Okay, so that's street light 1. I'm going to go ahead and create a new mask, radial gradient. All right, holding the shift key. All right, I'm going to make a smaller circle. All right, let me bring this over here. Zoom in so we can see what we're doing here. I'm going to bring that inner circle out a little bit more because I want this again scaled in proportion to our lamp. Okay, so I'm going to hold the shift key, make this about the size of the lamp. Okay, we're going to make that smaller. And this, in essence, is going to be the bulb inside. All right, so we're really going to push the exposure up here. Okay, so it looks like a light bulb. Okay, that looks like a light bulb, right? So before, after. Okay. All right, and this will be street light 2. Okay. And we're going to repeat the same exact process. We're going to duplicate the radial gradient 1, bring it to our next lamp, holding the shift key. We're going to size it to the size of our fixture. Okay. Duplicate, bring it over to the next one, holding the shift key, size it down. Duplicate, bring it over there, shift key, size it down. Last one, duplicate, bring that over, and it looks like it's a little bit smaller, but not by much. Okay. All right, let me zoom back out. And that's without the bulbs, with the bulbs, without the bulbs, with the bulbs. Okay. Actually, I can probably go to this one here and size that down just a bit. There we go. All right. Okay, so just with 2 masks, we lit all our lamps. Okay, but if you look at it, it looks uncanny. It looks uncanny. Why? Because we do not see any of the influence of the lamps themselves. All right, so this is where we're going to light a little bit of the spill down onto the ground. Okay, and we're going to be mindful of, like I said, of this garbage pail that's in the forefront here. So let's do that one first. All right, another radial gradient. Okay, and we're going to visualize this as a circle that drops down directly below our light source. Okay, so if we were to follow it down along the pole, the center of our circle will be at the base of that pole, and there's going to be a circle here. But because we are looking at it from the side, our circle is going to look more like an oval. Make sense? Okay. So new radial gradient from the base. I'm just going to go ahead and go out. And I'm going to just visualize how much of the ground is this lamp going to influence. Okay, and keep in mind that as it recedes, we're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, so I'm going to make this inner circle again. I'm going to make it fairly small because I want that nice gradual fall off towards the edge of our circle. Okay. All right. And from here, we're going to go and push our exposure up. And we can see that we're already starting to light the ground. Okay. Now our light is fairly warm. Okay. But because what we're doing here is we're just raising the exposure of on the pixels that are already there. Remember, we cooled those pixels down previously. So now in order to give it the illusion that it's being lit by a warm light, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of warmth to that light. Okay. And, you know, warmth to taste. That looks about right. Okay. Now, we see our first problem. Let me zoom in here and go down. Okay. If we notice, the top of our garbage can is wider than the literally the body of the can. All right. So because the light's coming down straight down onto this, it would make sense that underneath this wider part, we would have shadow. All right. So more than likely, I mean, yeah, there are spaces, there are slats here where the light would leak through. Okay. But it won't be this bright. Okay. So all this brightness that's hitting the sides here, we have to take that away because it looks off. All right. So we're going to take our mask and we are going to subtract, and we're just going to use a brush. Okay. Nice soft brush, fairly good size, and we're just going to brush away from that. Okay. And if I want, I should probably brush a little bit away from the side of that concrete, maybe not. Okay. If you don't like it, if you press and hold the Alt key, all right, it'll give you your, let me add a little bit of, okay. By pressing and holding, you'll see that it switches from the plus to the minus, all right? So we can change it to the eraser. I'm going to reduce my flow, and I'm just going to bring slowly some of that back. It's a little bit too dark. I want some influence on that concrete, but not too much. Okay, there we go. So before, after, okay. There we go. All right. And now we solved the bottom part of the trash can, but we need to resolve the top part because obviously that part gets lit, but it is outside of our circle from our radial gradient, right? So we're going to go ahead and add with our brush. We're going to add, I'm going to size my brush down up accordingly, and I'm just going to paint along the top part of this. All right, and you have to be kind of careful with how you do this. This is where having a pen tablet really comes into play here. Oh, let me bring my flow up. Okay, there we go. Just paint in some of that highlight. Okay, and then before, after, before, oops, after. Okay. All right, let's zoom back out. All right, so just like that, a little bit of dodging and burning. We have our pool of light number one. Okay. Now, the others don't have those considerations, so I'm going to keep this one separate on its own layer mask, and I can handle the remaining ones on another mask. So I'm going to go ahead and create radial gradient. Okay. Again, we bring up the exposure and we bring up the color balance. All right, let me zoom in. Okay. And then any influence that is not wanted, we have to get rid of it with a brush. Okay. So it's not looking like it's doing much to this pole here. So I think I'm okay with that. Okay. But if push comes to shove, what we can do is we can take it away from the shadow areas. All right. So any shadows, we just pull it out. Okay. So it's basically blend if. All right. That would be a blend if. All right. Okay. Duplicate. Bring it to our next one. Shift. Resize down. Okay. Actually, let me go up a little bit on the light. There you go. Take it, duplicate it. Oh, come on. There we go. Bring it to the next one. Hold the shift key, size it down. Duplicate. Bring it to the last one. I'm going to tilt it because it's a little bit at an angle there. All right. And is it influencing? No, it's not really influencing it. Good. Okay. So shift down a little bit. Okay. Zoom out, close that off. And you know what? I think these will be pool number 2. We're going to go a little bit brighter on those. All right. And yeah, there we go. Okay. So before, after. Okay. All right. That's our scene before. That's our scene after. Before, after. Before, after. Okay. Any questions?
That was really cool.
Okay. Now, keep this technique in mind because sometimes you may have a night scene where there might be some windows that are lit, but for some reason they're not coming across strongly on your in your image. You can use it to light windows as well. All right, you might need to go in and do a little cleanup around a window, but you can use the same technique to add light to a window. So if you want, if you have a landscape that's a little bit on the boring side, you want to create a little bit of interest, throw in a practical light. Light spilling out of a window is a great practical light. You can create the wash down on the lawn, light coming through the curtains, nice bright yellow, and voila, you've created interest. All right. And then of course you can do something like this. Okay. All right. Questions?
That was good. That was very good.
My voice lasted, thankfully. Okay. Any questions? No questions?
I have a comment about what you said at the beginning about that class that you're looking at doing or the challenge.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because lately what's been on my mind with the things I've been working on is you think like, well, I want to do something with them. Or, like I said, I pointed out there's a couple pictures that, they're good photos. And so I'm trying to think, how do I take them so that I can make them the best that they are?
Mm-hmm.
Or, and the funny is that lately I've been playing around with framing mock-ups, just to see how they might look in different framing arrangements.
Right. Yeah.
So So I'm interested in that aspect of it, and it's not, and I don't know if I really want to sell them, although I don't know if that's some sort of recognition for what I'm doing, or or if that's it. What can one do to get some recognition, or so
Well,
for me, another thing is how can I do it to turn it into a nice little senior side hustle, and keep doing these kinds of things because I
yeah.
like farting around with photographs.
Um, one very easy thing that you can do is well, how many images is going to be dependent on where you present them. But you can talk to local restaurants. You can talk to local libraries. All right. You can talk to local banks and some commercial properties where like Cinto Towers. There's a lot of people there. You can talk to the building manager there and see if any of these places are willing to host a gallery showing of your work. Whether it's a month or 3 months or however long you determine you want. Okay. And how many images you display is determined by how much wall space they're willing to give you. All right. I know
That's a question right there. I'm interrupting you, Doug, but so if I were going to do something like that, like, okay, I got to get these things printed, and so that's part of what I've been okay, what's the best way to print these, paper and size and, some of these restorations. And anyway, that's some of what I've been thinking about, when I come across these things is, oops, sorry. None of that seems to have anything to do with, the Photoshop part of it, but
Right.
anyway, it's been on my mind, and so I've been thinking along those lines, and not so much a challenge, but it's like your book challenge, that
Yeah.
me to a point, and I sent the book off. I'm still waiting for it to come back, but at some point I said, I'm going to have this because I want to try out this, and this page because I want to try out that, because if I wait until it's perfect, it'll never get done.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, okay. So one of the things that I've done in the past is CVS, Walgreens, Walmart. You can get 4x6s really, really inexpensively. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to curate your collection digitally. All right. And, put into a little collection all the images that really, you feel are your strongest images and or your most marketable images that will market your ability, and keep it to about a dozen. Okay, because more than a dozen, most places aren't going to put up more than a dozen images on their walls. Okay, most of them, anywhere between 4 and 6 images that fits comfortably within their establishment. Okay, but have 12 solid images that you like. Okay, and then print them out as 4x6s. So now you have a physical image, a physical photo to play with. All right. And you can spread them out on a desk, and you can now move them around and say, okay, well, this one and this one, they kind of go good together. So if I have a wall where I can put 2 up, this is my pair. Okay. And you can say, okay, or maybe they work better this way. No, this way, I think, you can figure that out when you have a physical print. Okay. Once you get the okay from an establishment, and it says, okay, we're going to give you this wall and that wall. And then you look at it and it says, oh, I can fit 5. All right. Then you take your best 5, because now you have something that you can move around and collate physically. Okay. And if you want, go ahead and print them as 8x10s. All right. They're not going to be the best quality, but it's inexpensive enough, only a couple dollars per print. And you get to have a physical larger print. And then there you're able to see, the color here, the whatever there. All right. Go through it, with a fine tooth comb. Okay. And then once you're happy, do the edit. Once you're happy, then you can send it to a printer that's going to give you the final size, whether that's 8x10s, 11x17s, or whatever it is. Okay.
Good.
But yeah, let's see. The library, if you want to get into the library, that's a good way of getting a lot of eyes on your work. They love putting local artists up there, but often there's a long waiting list. So just be aware of that. Okay. Restaurants, hit or miss. Okay. Wherever you go, all right, make sure that you, along with the pictures, you have a little placard that you can, double-sided tape. Be careful. You don't want to damage any walls that they're lending you. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's either, get the removable tapes, the command strips. Okay. Something that's non-marring, but make yourself little placards. Okay. You can print it out on, from your printer on an 8x10, glue it to a piece of foam board, and then just cut the rectangle out of the foam board. All right. And then mount the foam board to the wall. The name of the piece. If you want to sell the piece, maybe have the price and your contact information. Okay. Very important. Okay. That way people are looking at the work and they go, oh, I like this, if you don't necessarily want to sell the prints, but want to sell your services, market it on the wall. Okay. Have your information and your contact and, phone number, email, and, maybe a couple blurbs about what you like to quote unquote specialize in, family portraits, environmental portraits, whatever. Okay. But that's a fairly inexpensive. It's just going to cost you, your time and the materials for the prints and frames. But the nice thing is, once you have all that, once you have the prints and the frames, you just recycle it. Okay. Right. You just, this restaurant, will let you have it for, a month and a half. While you're talking, while you're showing it there, talk to another restaurant, next town over, and then just bounce them around.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Banks are iffy. Okay. Corporate enterprises, they kind of like stuff. All right. Some hospitals may have, gallery spaces available. You can look and see if Griffin has something available. You never know.
Not that I'm really connected, but just what you were talking about, it turns out that my girlfriend is pretty good friends with Cinto's main secretary.
There you go.
I had lunch with her a couple weeks ago.
There you go. There's your in. There's your in. Speaking of which, they're starting their Shakespeare season.
Oh yeah.
Back up, yeah. So, all right. So yeah, go for it. And then once you're displaying, once you got your little gallery showing, make sure you let everybody on social media know. All right.
Yeah.
If it's at a restaurant, the restaurant would love you to have an open house gallery showing, you know,
Oh, yeah.
because they make money. They get exposure. You know, it's people walking in their door to buy their food and their drink,
Hmm.
you know?
I like that idea. And you know, it's interesting, a side thing that part of what spurred me on to finally get these pictures restored and printed and the book and all that was I did a website a couple years ago for a longtime friend who is an artist. And I put, you know, I gathered photos so that we could make a gallery of his photos of his artwork, because he learned, he goes, if you're going to do this, there's a certain set of stepping stones, you know, in the art world,
Yeah.
you know, that one has to, that you should go through. And part of it is, you know, so we put the art out there with certain, you know, rules and that kind of thing. And it's interesting, you know, the process. And so that's
Yeah.
what inspired me to finally get going on my little deal here.
Yeah. 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 In order to get into a gallery, you have to prove to the gallery that you have a draw.
Right, right.
Yeah. Which is tough.
Yeah.
So.
Like I say, that's the little stepping stones that
Mhm.
one's going to do it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Look at those guys. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So stay tuned. Near future, an open house to Brian's show, Brian's photo show.
And you know, it's funny that just the side thing is that, you know, I realize I'm a printer junkie, I guess. And you know, even in the early days of computers, I was spending way more on printers than the average bear, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
People were spending 2,000 in HPs. I was buying $4,000 Kia Ceras, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but anyway, this so happened that my little Epson died last week, and so I'm looking at a new printer, and I'm going to go back to a Canon because with the inkwells,
Yes.
they're much better at printing pictures, which is something I purposely got away from because it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah. The two leading brands is Canon and Epson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and go for the cartridge-less ones. Go with the you just plug the bottle in.
Right. Well, that's been the problem with the one that just died. It was the old kind of Epson, and I'm not kidding. The cartridges were as much as the
Yeah.
printer every time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm kind of glad it died.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions?
And I'm going to jump off right now because I actually have another little meeting in a couple minutes.
Okay.
Thanks for everything, Doug.
Awesome. We'll see you. We'll see you all next week. We're going to be going over some of the AI stuff that Photoshop has put into the software. Okay.
I thought that was tonight. Good. That's next
No, that's
week.
next
Good.
week. Yeah, Photoshop.
All right. Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.